My talk is actually about something that a lot of people have touched on today, and that is that thing that is referred to as user-generated content or consumer-generated media. Both very weird and nasty words. I mean, I know that people feel passionately about them, but only in the wrong way. It's like, I hate that user-generated content word for describing what I do. What it is, though, is I want to touch a little bit on the democratic publishing revolution. And one of the things that we have seen in a lot of the talks today is that they share this passion for democratizing the power to publish. You know, the power to publish music, the power to publish ideas. And the way that they have done that is really by changing the definition of what publishing is about. I mean, if you look at consumer-generated content, or user-generated content, they have changed the definition of user, they have changed the definition of generation, and they have changed the definition of content. So I'd like to explore that a little bit. What I do at Studiocom is to tell stories about very complex things that really cannot be simplified. I happen to think that sometimes complex solutions are the best solutions, and there's no real need to simplify them if what you're doing is dumbing them down, like someone else mentioned earlier. I think that it's about this changing definition of what it's okay to say. My attempt today is going to be at looking at if we can make a story out of this user-generated content. I think it started with the tools to create. And I have been doing what I called computer-aided creativity for quite a long time. I started with desktop publishing. I must say that I cannot draw. I cannot draw for the life of me. I have very, very poor penmanship. And yet, I am a graphic designer by trade. And to some people, this is kind of amazing because it's, it's not that uncommon anymore, but it used to be very, very uncommon. What is this guy who cannot draw, who cannot really do anything with his hands appropriately, have any business doing with my logo or with my company? What is he doing? And the reason for that was that I happened to have a great tool that allowed me to do that. I think that the desktop publishing revolution changed a lot of things. It changed the opportunity for people like me to become graphic designers and to express the love that I have for visuals. It also changed the standards of what was considered good graphic design. Because once you put the tool in the name, in the hundreds and hundreds of people, a lot of things that were considered very difficult or that were not really looked well upon became standard. You started having people doing color separation on their desktops, and the quality looked kind of bad, but it was okay because it was done in this computer that cost a couple $1,000s versus the $100,000 scanner that they were used to managing. So they started to lower the expectancy of what media had to be, the shine that media have to have. And we were given this amazing amount of tools to edit content and to edit the things that we were putting out in the world. And then it was desktop video. First it was words and pictures and Photoshop, and you could make composites and erase blemishes and mash up things. And then people were doing the same with video. I had an Amiga computer, which I think I'm dating myself by saying this, but they had this thing called a video toaster, which was awful interface design, and but it did something very well, and it allowed you to have what they called it a television studio on your desktop. It wasn't really, but it allowed you to put up some television out of a computer. So instead of a couple $1 million in the case of television, which is what it took to create content and to edit this content and manipulate the content, the manipulation of the content was now in a box that did it somewhat, at somewhat decent, acceptable quality levels, and it did it for a lot less. And we're in a world of desktop everything nowadays. You have desktop gene sequencing, which it's absolutely unheard of, and people doing really, really strong visualization in machines. And I think that the first part of the expanding definition of content is this democratization of the creation of the content. We're really expanding the definition of creation. And we've done that by empowering individuals to express themselves. So the same way that I would not have been a very successful graphic designer if I had to rely on my hands and my X-Acto blade cutting skills, I became, I would say, let's call it successful graphic designer through the use of a tool and through the democratization of a tool. So that solved the first of the equations, which was how do we empower individuals to create? However, for a very long time, that only meant that you had the work, but you didn't have a successful way to share the work. And this is another place where technology has come to the rescue and where the changing definition of things have made a difference. With radio, you can always put up an antenna on the top of a building, but the amount of people that you can expose to that is somewhat limited. The real tools that allowed people to share content have not been around for a long time. It used to be that if you had video and you wanted people to see it, that you could do the film circuit, you could do the alternative film festivals, but the amount of exposure that you got to your content was very small. With the internet and social sharing sites and things like YouTube, you can actually, if you're lucky, get a very, very large audience to what you're actually creating. So we've changed the definition of what content creation is, and we've also changing slowly the definition of what community is. And here's my single graphic, well, actually 3 sequence for the day. And it's a change of the definition of the actual word community. It started as if you look at the definitions in dictionaries and what people give, if you look at them at pre-internet time, you would always see this idea of region or people congregating around a water cooler or around a well, or it was very location-based. It was people going around and talking to other people that they knew. And the key there is, this is people that they knew. Very few places and very few environments allowed you to really have this soapbox experience of putting up something, standing on it, and talking to people that you didn't know. So you started to see definitions of community later, like this one by Howard Reingold, of community being something where people exchange ideas through a network or through systems. The key, though, and the part that was missing, is that there was still a wall because you were only talking to the people that you knew about. So the people that were members of this network. And networks that, at the time of this statement were pretty much closed fields. I mean, you could go in and you had to get a membership or know the BBS operator to get in. So it was a little bit difficult for people to really expand concepts and really get things working out of those walls. And what allowed that to happen is something that we heard quite a bit about today, and that is this idea of word of mouth. But let me call it, technology-aided word of mouth. It is a way of getting into contact with things that you may not have heard about. It can be through stumble upon, or it could be through, just web browsing or hearing about it from a friend, but then having the opportunity of igniting that same discovery process in other people. So we have this culture right now where it used to be that if let's say you were cooking dinner for the holidays and you were doing some Thanksgiving dinner and you wanted to fry a turkey, what you would do is you would seek the experts. There's no entry for fried turkey, or at least there wasn't the last time I checked on the Joy of Cooking. It's usually done outside with a vat of oil and things like that. So it was not very, very popular entry. So what you did is you called people that were experts, and there were articles on it. And you used to be able to search the experts. In worst case scenario, you would call your mom or your aunt that really knows how to cook. So you would go to the expert. Nowadays, if I have any doubts on how to fry a turkey, I go online, I Google fried turkey, and I may end up relying on the opinion of Frank from Arkansas about turkey frying. And the reason I can is because I trust my peers. There's a lot of studies being done on this subject, and the power of me or of a peer as a brand is something that has quickly increased as the power of experts has really declined. People think that an expert has a vested interest. Who's advertising in the magazine that's telling me not to use canola oil for my fried turkey? I mean, what is the deal with it? So I start to look for people that are kind of like me, and nowadays, you as a spokesperson is a very, very powerful spokesperson when it comes to online. You had a lot of companies that have started on this premise. Are you guys familiar with Digital Photography Review, DP Review? It's a wonderful site about review of cameras, and it was started by someone that really knew what they were doing, and they were communicating to the world, and it changed into something that is really the first place a camera manufacturer nowadays sends a test camera just to see if they got it right. And it is about this power of expanding the definition of community. And in the end, what we have is this expanded definition of content. I think I will try to cover on all of them, but the one on content is very important to me. We have what I'm calling explicit content, which is, the hardcore explicit content is I sit down, I write a book, which I don't know how you guys that have books in the audience do it. That's an amazing amount. I mean, I don't know. Kudos to you all. But you can write for a blog, which is a little bit of the lighter experience, and I do that on occasion. You can take pictures, or you can shoot a movie. There's also this idea of live caching as content generation, which is this lightweight way of capturing the world around you. So everyone with a camera phone and everyone with something that they think it's worth recording will take a picture, will snap a picture, will take a blog that they read or an article that they read, and they will repost it, either repost their own or repost something new. But they're explicitly creating content. So these are the two ways that people see and think of content the most. However, in the work that I do, I'm often placed in a position where brands ask me to, or ask our company to come up with an idea where we can empower user-generated content. And it is my job to tell them that the likelihood of them becoming the next MySpace is very, 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 very low. I mean, it's this thing that I tell them, which is called suability, which is, if you're Coca-Cola, who happens to be one of our clients, the likelihood of you being able to publish a 1% of what's out in MySpace is zero. I mean, your lawyers will simply not have it. And if something's, for some bizarre turn of faith were to be published, you would get sued. It's a very difficult proposition for brands. That doesn't mean, however, that they are completely out of the user-generated space. They can sponsor places that have great user-generated content, but we have been also working with a lot of these brands to create what I call mediated content. And this is something that appeals to editors. If you look at hardcore content creators, I start from scratch. The editor is someone that takes the work that has already been done and changes it and adds of itself and reprioritizes it to publish it. And it is a very, very important job. So this shift from the brand generating content and the user happens a lot with this thing I call mediated content. Mediated content is when you give me a set of tools to create content. So who has an avatar in the audience that they have created for something, a little character? Not that many, that would be more. But when you've done that, you've been in the mediated content business. There's no way that you could, well, there are some ways in Second Life, but through the set of tools that they have created, they can have an expected range of results. So mediated content allows you to actually do that. It allows you to create content in a way where you're not exposing yourself to content that would be inappropriate. It's also a great way of circumventing this dilemma of rules. We see, and there's great work being done in this in every field, from cellular automata to the field of ethics, where they realize that there's a certain number of rules that will foster growth, but when you add more and more, it will actually hamper growth. So, one of the ways that you can actually keep working in that space is to work with this mediated content. What we say internally, and this is basically the mantra for communities practice, is that every action, if you manage to share it, is content. And that truly means every action. If you have a virtual world and you have millions and millions of rooms created, each room is a piece of content. If you have avatars, that's a piece of content. And this is something that happens quite a bit, and it's a great way of creating virtual worlds. We have this it's old school by technology standards. It's been 5 years since we started a community called Coke Studios, which is a little walk-around type world. And we have 1.7 million user-created rooms, and we have 17 rooms that we created. So it really shows, and there are all rooms that the name Coca-Cola can be attached to them. So we were able to circumvent that suitability. And then the last one is relations with content. And this is changing the actor of what's making the content. It used to be people. Now it's actually devices and networks that are making the content. When you log into Facebook and you very quickly add your friends, or if you have a profile on Match, you're creating a tremendous amount of content that you haven't provided by just creating these points in the mesh of what relations are between the different people or between the different interests. So, we're essentially also expanding the definition of user. So, I know the talk was supposed to be about innovation, and I've been doing a recap of, the user-generated content. But I think that what is very important is that as we understand the changing role of individuals, and I very much agree with the idea that, you cannot, they use that word crowdsource, which is, ask a lot of people to do something. I I believe that ideas have to have a little bit more of an individual power, and they need to stay individual, that if you put too many points of view, you end up averaging things. But understanding the possibility of an individual that is not in your organization, that is not part of your local network, that is part of this extended network, is an idea generator. It's a great way to do innovation, and it really requires that we change the way that we looked at the different individuals that are not professional innovators, or that are outside of our networks, that are not in business, as credible sources of innovation, as credible sources of ideas. So the name of the talk was Power to the People. It's a little bit lofty, so I put it at the end. And that's basically it.